Thank you, dear friends. Thank you for the organizing committee who has arranged such a wonderful conference. And thank you for our dear MC for giving me such a great introduction. Dear friends, I am reminded by the Supreme Badi, the Universal House of Justice, in its letter dated January 3rd, 1984. It wrote, "May you all persevere in your individual efforts to teach the faith, but with added zest, to study the writings, but with greater earnestness. May you pursue your education and training for future service to mankind, offering as much of your free time as possible to activities on behalf of the cause. May those of you already bent on your life's work and who have already founded families strive towards becoming the living embodiment of Baha'i ideals, both in the spiritual nurturing of your families and in your active involvement in the efforts of home front or abroad in the pioneering fields. May you all respond to the current demands upon the faith by displaying a fresh measure of dedication to the tasks at hand." It was very difficult for me to choose to focus how it is possible to do justice to this mighty cause in 2 or 30 minutes, but I will tell you what is uppermost in my heart and what I most want to share with you, and what that is the wisdom and guidance, the confidence and the strength that is available to all of us to guide every day of our lives from our supreme institution, the Universal House of Justice. Because we know Baha'u'llah, and you know the wonderful thing about the Baha'i faith is that Baha'u'llah knew to whom he was giving his revelation. He said that there was only one person on the planet that was deserving of hearing that revelation. And who was that? Abdul Baha. But he knew that revelation would be transforming of the likes of you and me, and that he would be able to arise and carry it forward and change all of reality. Make the earth a new earth. Make the people a new race of people. So the challenge for us is not to believe what we see in the mirror when we get up in the morning, because our principal conflict is the doubt. We fear that we are capable of bringing about this great change that Baha'u'llah had given us the responsibility to make happen. We believe in Baha'u'llah. Our challenge is to believe in ourselves as agents of his purposes. What does he say in the hidden words? It says, "Thou art my stronghold," he says. "Thou art my lamp, and my light is in thee," he says. "With the hands of power I made thee, and with the fingers of strength I created thee." So our challenge is to ignore what we see in the mirror when we get up in the morning. Our challenge is to understand that Baha'u'llah knows us better than we know ourselves, that he will challenge us, he will create us, he will reconstruct us, that he will lift us up, and that he will move us through our dark times to the light, and he will transform us from material to spiritual beings. The Universal House of Justice acknowledges change takes time. Change takes time and is often not a quick process. The House of Justice writes that change is an evolutionary process requiring patience with oneself and others, loving education, and the passage of time as the believers deepen their knowledge of the principles of the faith, gradually discard long-held traditional attitudes, and progressively conform their lives to the unifying teachings of the cause. The topic of transformation is what we're going to explore tonight. His Holiness Baha'u'llah proclaims in the Kitab-i-Iran, the Book of Certitude, page 240, he states, "And yet is not the object of every revelation to effect a transformation in the whole character of mankind. A transformation that shall manifest itself both outwardly and inwardly, that shall affect both its inner life and external conditions. For if the character of mankind be not changed, the futility of God's universal manifestations would be apparent. Here Baha'u'llah is clearly stating the very purpose of every revelation. Friends, this is very important, very important. Here Baha'u'llah is clearly stating the very purpose of every revelation. The purpose of the revelation of Abraham, the revelation of Krishna, Buddha, Moses, Christ, Muhammad, the Bab, Baha'u'llah. And this very purpose is what? The transformation of the whole character of mankind. Baha'u'llah states that this transformation needs to manifest itself both outwardly and inwardly. That shall affect both its inner life and external conditions. And he goes on, and this is very, 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 very important. He says, the word here is affect. And affect means what, friends? It means to make a difference. It means to make a change, a transformation. And this is what Baha'u'llah is getting at. The very heart of the revelation of Baha'u'llah. He says, then Baha'u'llah states, if the character of mankind be not changed, the futility of God's universal manifestations would be apparent. Now this statement is incredibly strong and powerful. If we friends as humanity do not change, if we do not work to transform our characters, if we do not attempt and work on this, Baha'u'llah states, the futility of the manifestations of God would be made apparent. The perfect exemplar Abdul Baha, in Tablets of the Divine Plan, page 96, writes, they must completely divest themselves from the old garments and be invested with a new garment, according to the statement of Christ. They must attain to the station of rebirth. Rebirth. That is, whereas in the first instance they were born from the womb of the mother, this time they must be born from the womb of the world of nature. Just as they are now totally unaware of the experiences of the fetal world, they must also forget entirely the defects of the world of nature. They must be baptized with the water of life, the fire of the love of God, and the breaths of the Holy Spirit. Be satisfied with little food, but take a large portion from the heavenly table. They must disengage themselves from temptation and covetousness, and be filled with the Spirit. Through the effect of their pure breath, they must change the stone into the brilliant ruby, and the shell into pearl. Like unto the cloud of vernal shower, they must transform the black soil into the rose garden and orchard. They must make the blind seeing, the deaf hearing, the extinguished one enkindled and set aglow, and the dead quickened. Friends, how powerful. It is this transformation that we are talking about. It is this change of character Baha'u'llah summons us to. The Universal House of Justice, in a Rizvan message, 1989, he states, we need a change of heart. Friends, this is what they state. We need a change of heart. A reframing of all our conceptions and a new orientation of our activities. The inward life of man, as well as his outward environment, have to be reshaped if human salvation is to be secured. The beloved guardian writes, the power of God can entirely transmute our characters and make us beings entirely unlike our previous selves. Now, this is incredible. What does he say? He says the power of God can entirely transmute our characters. Transmute, change, transform. This is what he says. Entirely transmute our characters and make us beings entirely unlike our previous selves. Now, what does he say? He says, through prayer and supplication, obedience to the divine laws Baha'u'llah has revealed, and ever increasing service to his faith, we can change ourselves. So this is what the beloved guardian states. He says he assures us that we can change ourselves with the reliance on the power of the divine assistance through prayer and supplication, and obedience to the divine laws revealed by Baha'u'llah, and ever-increasing service to his faith. The transformation of character is of paramount importance, friends. It is at the very heart and purpose of the manifestations of God. The guardian writes, humanity, through suffering and turmoil, is swiftly moving on towards its destiny. If we be loiterers, if we fail to play our part, surely others will be called upon to take up their tasks as ministers to the crying needs of this afflicted world. Not by the force of numbers, not by the mere exposition of a set of new and noble principles, and not by an organized campaign of teaching, no matter how worldwide and elaborate in its character, not even by the staunchness of our faith or the exaltation of our enthusiasm, can we ultimately hope to vindicate in the eyes of a critical and skeptical age the supreme claim of the Abha revelation. One thing, and only one thing, will unfailingly and alone secure the undoubted triumph of this sacred cause. Namely, here friends, this is it, namely the extent to which our inner life and private character mirror forth in their manifold aspects the splendor of those eternal principles proclaimed by Baha'u'llah. Namely, the extent to which our inner life and private character mirror forth in their manifold aspects the splendor of those eternal principles proclaimed by Baha'u'llah. Friends, this is at the very heart of the revelation. This is the very essence, friends. Peace of mind. He goes on. This is the beloved guardian. In another letter, he says, peace of mind is gained by the centering of the spiritual consciousness on the Prophet of God. Therefore, friends, you should study the spiritual teachings and receive the water of life from the holy utterances. Then, by translating these high ideals into action, your entire character will be changed, and your mind will not only find peace, but your entire being will find joy and enthusiasm. It is this transformation of character that is at the heart of the revelation of Baha'u'llah, is at the heart of the revelation of His Holiness Christ, heart of the revelation of Muhammad. This transformation of character, friends, we're talking about. So friends, at this time, let's explore the life and story of one who was completely transformed, whose inner life and external conditions mirror forth in their manifold aspects the splendor of those eternal principles proclaimed by Baha'u'llah. Friends, this is the story of Badi. And in Epistle to the Son of the Wolf, Baha'u'llah writes, call thou to mind his honor Badi, and reflect how he laid down his life. Mullah Muhammad Ezarandi, Nabil Azam, in the course of his travels, prior to his Egyptian episode, his imprisonment in Alexandria, and his subsequent sojourn in the Holy Land, came to Nishabur in the province of Khorasan. There he met Haji Abdullah Majid Shalfarush, a noted merchant and a survivor of Sheikh Tabarsi, and as Nabil himself says, an old acquaintance. Haji Abdul Majid took him to his home. There Nabil met Sheikh Muhammad Muammuri, the uncle of the martyr. Sheikh Ahmad Khorasani engaged in copying tablets of Baha'u'llah, and to his surprise, Nabil found Haji Abdul Majid attending personally to everything. He asked the Haji whether he did not have a son old enough to assist him. The reason behind the question was that Nabil must have been surprised that Abba Badi was entertaining him personally, because in those days the young generally paid great respect to their parents, and in a case such as this, a young son would not allow his father to serve the guest personally, bearing in mind that it was against the custom of the time for the female members of the family to entertain guests of the opposite sex. Haji Abdul Majid replied that he had, but his son did not obey him. Indeed, his son, Agha Buzurg, a youth in his teens, led a wild life, was unruly, and took no interest at all in his father's preoccupations. In a word, he was the despair of his family. To see what followed, let Nabil, that inimitable narrator, tell us himself. I said, "Send for him to come. I wish to see him." He was sent for, and he came. I saw a tall, gangling youth, who instead of physical perfection, had merely a simple heart, and I told his father to make him my host and leave his case to God. Then I mentioned matters very moving, which would melt a heart of stone. Nabil Azam here quotes a number of verses from the long poem by Baha'u'llah, Qasidiya Baha'i, which he composed in Sulaymaniyeh. In these verses quoted by Nabil, Baha'u'llah speaks of his own sufferings and tribulations. Hearing these divine themes, the color of the visage of that youth reddened. His eyes welled with tears, and the sound of his lamentation rose high. I calmed his agitation, but throughout that night his enamorment and attraction kept sleep away from the eyes of Sheikh Muhammad and myself. Until the light broke, we read and recited from the Holy Script. In the morning, when he prepared the samovar for tea and went out to fetch milk, his father came and said, I had never heard my son weep. I thought that nothing could move him. Now what is this spell cast on him to make his tears flow and to cause him to cry out, to make him afire with the love of God? I said, in any case, he is no longer in command of himself, and you must give him up. And his father said, this manner of losing oneself is exactly what I desired. If he remains firm in the cause of God, I myself shall serve him. Agha Buzurg was insistent that he should accompany me to Mashhad. But his father said, I brought Sheikh Muhammad here specially to be his tutor, so that he might learn reading and writing within a short time, and study the Iran under Sheikh Muhammad's tuition, and make a copy of the book. Should he do these, then I undertake to provide him with a steed and all his expenses. Nabil writes, subsequent to my departure from Khorasan and arrival at Tehran, Sheikh Fani reached Nishabur and mentioned that he was on his way to Bandar Abbas, so as to go to Baghdad and ultimately to the land of mystery, Adrianople, and was permitted to take one person with himself. Janaba Abab Badi, the father of Badi, provided his dear son with a steed and money, so that he might catch up with me at Baghdad, and he might travel together to the abode of the beloved. Badi had accompanied the Sheikh up to Yazd, and there had parted company with him, and giving the Sheikh all that he possessed, and all alone had set out on foot to walk all the way to Dar es Salaam, the abode of peace, which is Baghdad. While Badi was in Baghdad, the enemies of the cause fatally wounded Agha Abdur Rasul Qurmi, an ardent follower of Baha'u'llah, who had taken upon himself the arduous task of carrying water to the house of Baha'u'llah in that city. In those days in the Middle East, there was no running water in houses. Water had to be carried from springs or rivers. There were water carriers in every town. The most common method was to carry large leather skins filled with water on one's back. The supply of water to that house was essential, as some believers were living there. When Badi learned of the tragic story of the martyrdom of Agha Abdul Rasul, he volunteered for the job and began to carry skins of water from the river to the house of Baha'u'llah, and the believers consequently, he too became a target of assaults by the enemy. He was attacked several times as he was carrying the water, and each time stabbed with knives or daggers. Undeterred by the malice of the fanatic mob, this youth, whose destiny was to become a new creation of God in this day, and a spiritual giant of this dispensation, continued in this work. God vouchsafed his protection to him during those turbulent days. And when the companions were rounded up to be taken to Mosul, that illumined youth, although wounded in several places by rascally men, betook himself to Mosul, and reached that city before the arrival of the captives, where once again he engaged in carrying water for them. After some time, the news reached the believers that Baha'u'llah had been exiled to Akka. Badi couldn't wait no longer. The day had come in the life of this 17-year-old youth when he felt that he had to turn to Baha'u'llah, and he began to walk all the way from Mosul to the waters of the Mediterranean, to the foot of the citadel of Akka, where he knew his Lord was incarcerated. He arrived there early in 1869. Badi seems to have entered the city without much difficulty. The watchful eyes of Sayyid Muhammad Isfahani and his accomplice Agha Jan, who were housed above the gate of the city, so that they might report to the authorities the arrival of any person they suspected of being a Baha'i, failed to recognize the youth carrying his water skins and wearing a long cloak of coarse cotton of the type worn among the Arabs. Once inside the city, however, he was at a loss, for he had no idea how to contact his fellow believers and could not risk betraying himself by making enquiries. Uncertain as to the course he should follow, he repaired to a mosque in order to pray. Towards evening, a group of Persians entered the mosque, and to his delight, Badi recognized Abdul Baha among them. He waited till the prayer was finished and then approached the master with great reverence and handed him a note containing 2 lines of a poem he had hurriedly composed on the spot. In it he had, without introducing himself, declared his loyalty to the master and his faith in Baha'u'llah in moving and tender language. Abdul Baha warmly welcomed Badi and managed to take him to the barracks. In one of the tablets written by Mirza Agha Jan, it is stated that Badi was ushered into the presence of Baha'u'llah, alone on 2 occasions. No one knew what was happening in these audiences, except that Baha'u'llah had said that God was about to create a new creation, and Badi himself was unaware of it. In another tablet, Baha'u'llah states that he created him anew with the hands of power and might and sent him out as a ball of fire. It was in the course of these 2 meetings that Baha'u'llah gave him the name Badi, wonderful. In yet another tablet, Baha'u'llah has testified that he took a handful of dust, mixed it with the waters of might and power, and breathed into it a new spirit from his presence, adorned it with the ornament of a name, Badi, in the kingdom of creation, and sent it out to the king with a book revealed by God. In a tablet to the father of Badi, Baha'u'llah recounts in moving language the exciting events which took place when his son had attained his presence. He indicates that when he desired to create a new creation, he summoned Badi to come to his room and uttered one word to him, a word which caused his whole being to tremble. He affirms that had it not been for the divine protection vouchsafed to him at that moment, Badi would have swooned away. Then the hand of omnipotence, according to Baha'u'llah's description, began to create him anew and breathed into him the spirit of might and power. So great was the infusion of this might, as attested by Baha'u'llah, that single and alone he could have conquered the world through the power of God, had he been ordered to do so. Baha'u'llah states that when this new creation came into being, he smiled in his presence and manifested such steadfastness that the concourse on high were deeply moved and exhilarated, and the voice of God was heard calling aloud, "Hallowed and glorified be Baha for having fashioned a new and wonderful creation." Baha'u'llah testifies that he disclosed to his eyes the kingdom of revelation, and as a result his whole being was filled with an ecstasy that rid him of all attachments to this world and made him arise to assist his Lord and bring victory to his cause. That Baha'u'llah had enabled Badi, while in his presence, to see the kingdom of revelation in a unique bounty of which we can have no understanding. The only thing we can deduce from observing this illustrious youth is that whatever had happened to him in the presence of Allah, he was entirely a different person when he left. Before, he was only a handful of dust, but after his 2 audiences with Allah, he became a new creation into which the spirit of might and power had been breathed. That Badi had been carried away into a world of joy and eternal ecstasy as a result of meeting Baha'u'llah is not in itself a unique experience. Every one of his followers with a pure heart was deeply moved and exhilarated when they came in contact with him. Like a piece of iron which becomes magnetized when in contact with a magnet. But the case of Badi was a special one. Haji Mirza Haidar Ali has explained some of his experiences in the presence of Baha'u'llah in Akka and made a comment about Badi. Haji Mirza Haidar Ali describes the effect of being in the presence of Baha'u'llah when he chanted a tablet he had revealed for him. This is the translation of some of his words. This tablet was chanted by the beauty of the All-Bountiful. What an effect it had on me! To what a world did I ascend? To what a paradise did I enter? What did I see? In what way did I hear the voice and that melody? These I cannot tell. I entered that paradise which no eye had seen, and no ear had heard, nor any heart had felt. I saw the kingdom of grandeur and majesty, and felt the might, the transcendent power, the glory and the sovereignty of the ever-living, the ever-abiding, the incomparable God. But to speak of it, write about it, give an image or likeness of it, exalt and sanctify it, allude to it, extol and praise it, or describe and narrate it, all these are impossible for this humble servant or anyone else in the world. We have only access to words and terms, whereas that experience and condition are exalted, above all things. They cannot be put into words or described by talks. No one can interpret the inner feelings of one's conscience, but this condition remains only for a single moment. It is a fleeting experience. Its manifestation within the human being is due to a special bounty of God. Its duration, varying from the twinkling of an eye to a longer period, depends upon one's capacity to become the recipient of this bounty. The deeds and actions of the person demonstrate its existence, but it has never been heard that this condition lasted for 3 or 4 months in a person, except in Badi. Many were the men, veterans, who had longed for the honor to be entrusted with that letter. But Baha'u'llah had made no move and waited. He had waited a long time until the forlorn, the weary youth who had come to receive the gift of second birth from his hands reached the gates of Akka and entered the citadel. When Badi learned that Baha'u'llah was looking for someone to deliver a special tablet to Nasruddin Shah, he begged to be allowed to carry out this service, knowing full well that he would have to lay down his life. Baha'u'llah accepted him for this important mission, instructed him to proceed to Haifa, where he would be given the tablet, and instructed him also not to associate with any believer, either on the way or in Tehran. The tablet to the Shah of Persia was not handed to Badi in Akka. Baha'u'llah entrusted Haji Shah Muhammad Amin with a small case and a tablet to be delivered into the hands of Badi. Haji Mirza Haidar Ali has recorded in his history, Behujat Sudur, an account he heard from Haji Shah Muhammad Amin. I was given a small box, the length of which was 1.5 spans. Its width was less than 1 span, and its thickness was 1/4 of a span. And I was told to deliver it to him, Badi, in Haifa, together with a few pounds. I did not know what was in the box. I met him in Haifa and gave him the good news that a favor had been bestowed upon him, and I was entrusted with its delivery. And so he went outside the town unto Mount Carmel, and I delivered the box to him. He held it with both hands and kissed it. Then he prostrated himself. There was also a sealed envelope for him, which he took from me. He walked some 20 or 30 paces away from me. Turning towards the place of Baha'u'llah's imprisonment, he sat down and read it. On the envelope, Baha'u'llah inscribed certain words. This inscription attracted Badi. His face shone. The following is an excerpt from this inscription. We ask God to send one of his servants, and to detach him from contingent being, and to adorn his heart with the decoration of strength and composure, that he may help his Lord among the concourse of creatures, and go with speed to the abode of the throne. Let him told converse with none till he goeth forth one day, and standeth where he, the Shah, shall pass by. Then let him raise aloft the letter, and with the utmost humility and courtesy say, It hath been sent on the part of the prisoner. It is incumbent upon him to be in such a mood that should the Shah decree his death, he shall not be troubled within himself, and shall hasten to the place of sacrifice, saying, O Lord, praise be to thee that thou hast made me a helper. By thy glory I would not exchange this cup for all the cups in the world, neither is it rivaled by the quather of Salsabil. He then prostrated himself again, and his face was radiant with joy and ecstasy. I asked him whether I could also have the honor of reading the tablet which he had received, but he replied, There is no time. I understand that it was a matter which could not be divulged. What was it? I had no idea at all of the significance of what was happening, nor of the importance of the task with which he had been commissioned. I said to him, Come with me into Haifa, for I have been instructed to deliver a sum of money to you. He replied, I won't come into the town with you. You go and bring the money. I went and returned, but could not find him anywhere. He had departed. I wrote to Beirut that they should give him the money there, but they had not seen him. I had no further news of him until I heard reports of his martyrdom from Tehran. Then I realized that in that box had been the Loh-e-Sultan, and in the envelope had been a tablet bearing tidings of the martyrdom of that essence of steadfastness and constancy. Badi plodded on, a solitary figure over deserts and mountain peaks, for 4 months, never seeking a companion, never choosing a friend with whom he could share his great secret. His father had no knowledge of his return. Haji Shah Muhammad Amin has further related, the late Haji Ali, brother of Haji Ahmad of Port Said, used to recount, From Trebizond to Tabriz, I was in Badi's company for some of the stages of the journey. He was full of joy, laughter, gratitude, and forbearance, and I only knew that he had been in the presence of Baha'u'llah, and now was returning to his home in Khorasan. Time and again I observed that having walked a little more or less than 100 paces, he would leave the road and turning to face Akka, would prostrate himself. And could be heard to say, O God, that which you have bestowed upon me through your bounty, do not take back through your justice. Rather grant me strength to safeguard it. In Tehran, As bidden by Baha'u'llah, Badi did not go in search of his fellow Baha'is, but spent 3 days in fasting, while he made certain where the Shah's summer camp was, and went straight there, sitting on a hillock all day long, so that he may be seen and taken to the Shah. The hour came when the Shah set out on a hunting expedition. Badi approached him calmly, addressing the monarch with respect. "O king, I have come to thee from Sheba with a weighty message." Nasruddin Shah may have been taken back, but the confident tone of that youth had already impressed on his consciousness that this message had come to him from Baha'u'llah. In the words of Shoghi Effendi, at the sovereign's order, the tablet was taken from him and delivered to the mujtahids of Tehran, who were commanded to reply to that epistle, a command which they evaded, recommending instead that the messenger should be put to death. That tablet was subsequently forwarded by the Shah to the Persian ambassador in Constantinople, in the hope that its perusal by the Sultan's ministers might serve to further inflame their animosity. Only those well versed in the history of Persia in the 19th century can appreciate the immense dangers which faced an ordinary person like Badi, wishing to meet a palace official, let alone the king. A despot such as Nasruddin Shah ruled his country with a rod of iron. The government officials showed their authority through tyranny. They were accustomed to deal ruthlessly with anyone who dared to utter a word or raise a finger against them or the established regime. The mere sighting of a soldier wearing the military uniform or of a low-ranking government officer was sufficient to frighten people away. As these men passed through the streets, most people showed their respect for them. Sometimes they had to bribe them, and the timid often ran away. To meet the king was far more frightful. When the forward section of the royal escort arrived in the street, the cry of the herald who announced to the public the approach of the king's entourage would strike terror into the hearts of the citizens. It was a familiar term to all when he shouted, "Everyone die, everyone go blind." The significance of these instructions was that as the king and his men passed, everyone must stand still as a dead corpse, and all the eyes must be cast down as if blind. In theory, the king may do what he pleases. His word is law. The saying that the law of the Medes and the Persian altereth not was merely an ancient paraphrase of the absolutism of the sovereign. He appoints and he may dismiss all ministers, officers, officials, and judges over his own family and household, and over the civil or military functionaries in his employ. He has the power of life and death without reference to any tribunal. The property of any such individual, if disgraced or executed, reverts to him. The right to take life in any case is vested in him alone, but can be delegated to governors or deputies. Such is the divinity that doth hedge a throne in Persia, that not merely does the Shah never attend at state dinner or eat with his subjects at table, with the exception of a single banquet to his principal male relatives at Nauruz, but the attitude and language employed towards him, even by his confidential ministers, are those of servile obseisance and adulation. "May I be your sacrifice." Asylum of the universe is the common mode of address, adopted even by subjects of the highest ranks. Knowing the circumstances which prevailed at the time, we can appreciate the courage and steadfastness of Badi, and the spirit of ascendancy and superhuman audacity which this youth of 17 manifested, as he stood assured and confident, straight as an arrow, face to face with the king. Calmly and courteously he handed him the tablet, and in a loud voice movingly called out the celebrated verse from the Quran, "O king, I have come unto thee from Sheba with a weighty message." The officer in charge of torturing Badi narrates himself about the events that took place. Let me tell you a tale. This man was a strange creature. At Safed Ablar, the Shah mounted to go hunting. As it happened, I had not mounted. Suddenly I saw 2 cavalrymen galloping towards me. The Shah had sent for me. I immediately mounted, and when I reached the Shah, he told me that a Babi had brought a letter. I ordered his arrest. The Shah said, and he is now in the custody of Kishikachi Bashi, is the head of the sentries. Go and take him to Farashakhane. Deal with him gently at first, but if not successful, use every manner of force to make him confess and reveal who his friends are and where they are to be found, until I return from the hunt. I went, took him from the Kisik Bashi, and brought him away, hands and arms tied. But let me tell you something of the sagacity and the alertness of the Shah. This man was unmounted in that plain, and as soon as he raised his paper to say that he had a letter to deliver, the Shah sensed that he must be a Babi and ordered his arrest and the removal of any letter he had. He was then detained, but had not given his letter to anyone, and had it in his pocket. I took this messenger home. At first I spoke to him kindly and gently. Give me a full account of all of this. Who gave you this letter? From where have you brought it? How long was it? Who are your comrades? He said. This letter was given to me in Akka by Hazratul Baha'u'llah. He told me, you will have to go to Iran all alone and somehow deliver this letter to the Shah of Iran. But your life may be endangered. If you accept that, go otherwise. I will send another messenger. I accepted the task. It is now 3 months since I left. I have been looking for an opportunity to give this letter into the hands of the Shah and bring it to his notice. And thanks be to God that today I rendered my service. If you want Baha'is, they are numerous in Iran. And if you want my comrades, I was all alone and have none. I pressed him to tell me the names of his comrades and the names of the Baha'is of Iran, particularly those of Tehran, and he persisted with his denial. I have no comrade, and I do not know the Baha'is of Iran. I swore to him, if you tell me these names, I will obtain your release from the Shah and save you from death. His reply to me was, I am longing to be put to death. Do you think that you frightened me? Then I sent for the bastinado, and Farishes, 6 at a time, started to beat him. No matter how much he was beaten, he never cried out, nor did he implore. When I saw how it was, I had him released from the bastinado, and brought him to sit beside me, and told him once again, give me the names of your comrades. He did not answer me at all, and began to laugh. It seemed as if all that beating had not harmed him in any way. This made me angry. I ordered a branding iron to be brought, and a lighted brazier. While they were preparing the brazier, I said, come and speak the truth, else I will have you branded. And at that I noticed that his laughter increased. Then I had him bastinadoed again. Beating him that much tired out the Farishes. I myself was also tired out. So I had him untied and taken to the back of another tent, and told the Farishes that by dint of branding they ought to get a confession from him. They applied red-hot iron several times to his back and chest. I could hear the sizzling noise of the burning flesh and smell it too, but no matter how hard we tried, we could get nothing out of him. It was about sunset that the Shah returned from hunting and summoned me. I went to him and related all that had happened. The Shah insisted that I should make him confess and then put him to death. So I went back and had him branded once again. He laughed and laughed under the impact of the red-hot iron and never implored. I even consented that this fellow should say that what he had brought was a petition, and make no mention of the letter. Even to that he did not consent. Then I lost my temper and ordered a plank to be brought. A Farish who wielded a pounder used for ramming in iron pegs put this man's head on the plank and stood over him with the raised pounder. I told him, if you divulge the names of your comrades, you will be released. Otherwise I will order them to bring that pounder down on your head. He began to laugh and give thanks for having gained his object. I consented that he should say it was a petition he had brought, not a letter. He even would not say that, and all those red-hot rods applied to his flesh caused him no anguish. So in the end I gave a sign to the Farish, and he brought down that pounder on this fellow's head. His skull was smashed, and his brain oozed through his nostrils. Then I went myself and reported it all to the Shah. As the 3 successive days of torture by branding yielded no information about the identity of other believers, the chief officer Qasim Khan threatened Badi with death unless he cooperated. Badi smiled at this threat, and as he did not reveal any name, his head was beaten to a pulp with a butt of a rifle. His body was thrown into a pit, and earth and stones heaped upon it. This was in July 1869. Now when His Majesty the King had perused certain passages and become cognizant of the contents of the epistle, he was much affected at what had taken place, and manifested regret because his courtiers had acted hastily and put into execution a severe punishment. It is even related that he said thrice, "Doth anyone punish one who is but the channel of correspondence?" Then the royal command was issued that their reverences, the learned doctors, and honorable and accomplished divines should write a reply to that epistle. But when the most expert doctors of the capital became aware of the contents of the letter, they ordained that this person, without regarding the fact that he is at variance with the perspicuous religion, is a meddler with custom and creed, and a troubler of kings and emperors. Therefore, to eradicate, subdue, repress, and repel this sect is one of the requirements of the well-established path, and indeed the chief of obligations. This answer was not approved before the royal presence, for the contents of this epistle had no obvious discordance with the law or with reason, and did not meddle with political or administrative matters, nor interfere with or attack the throne of sovereignty. They ought therefore to have discussed the real points at issue, and to have written clearly and explicitly such an answer as would have caused the disappearance of doubts and the solution of difficulties, and would have become a fulcrum for discussion to all. The message of the Bab, the accounts of his martyrdom, and the transforming power of his cause had already reached every corner of that land, and from there its reverberations had echoed to the Western world. But the people of Persia did not differentiate between the revelation of Baha'u'llah and that of the Bab. Most people considered the Baha'i faith to be the same as the Babi faith, and did not appreciate the vast differences in the teachings of the two. The proclamation of the cause of Baha'u'llah to the Shah of Persia had a special significance. This momentous tablet, handed to the person of the sovereign himself, was meant to introduce the faith of Baha'u'llah in its true perspective to the inhabitants of Persia. The people in that country knew a good deal about the Babi faith, and the majority were antagonistic to it. For over 2 decades the people of Persia had witnessed memorable acts of heroism performed by that small band of God-intoxicated heroes whose devotion and self-sacrifice had lit a great conflagration throughout that country. As attested by Baha'u'llah in a tablet, not until this momentous epistle was delivered to the king had the nature of the cause of God, or the claims of its founders, or its principles and teachings been clearly enunciated to those who held the reins of power in their hands. He mentions in the same tablet that before Badi had delivered that weighty epistle to the king, God's testimony had not been fulfilled, and the conclusive proofs of his faith had not been declared. But after the proclamation of his message, there was no remaining excuse for anyone to arise against his cause. And since the people of Persia did not respond to the call of God, which was clearly raised in that message, sufferings and tribulations, which had already been prophesied by the pen of Baha'u'llah, descended upon them as a punishment from God. In the forementioned tablet to Haji Abdul Majid, the father of Badi, Baha'u'llah states that the temple of the cause of God was adorned by Badi, and that his station was so exalted that no pen could describe it. Through him, Baha'u'llah affirms, the pillars of tyranny were shaken, and the countenance of victory unveiled itself. He had attained to such heights in the worlds above that no mention could be made of it. We have known that the pen of Baha'u'llah for the space of 3 years lauded his valor and constancy. We have known that to him was given the title of Fakhru'e Shuhada, the pride of martyrs, and that Baha'u'llah characterized his references to his sublime sacrifice as the salt of my tablets. In these tablets, Baha'u'llah not only glorifies the station of Badi, but also attaches great importance to the proclamation of his message to the Shah of Persia. In one of these tablets he states, in referring to Badi, that he had offered up the life of one of his servants after having created him anew with the hands of might and power, and sent him straight into the mouth of a serpent, so that the peoples of the world might become assured that the Almighty God stands transcendent and supreme over his creation. Baha'u'llah further states that he sent Badi with a book in which he had proclaimed his cause and declared conclusively his proofs to all humanity. He affirms that he had removed from the person of Badi every trace of fear, adorned him with the ornament of faith and power, fired his soul with the utterance of a word, and sent him out as a ball of fire to proclaim his cause. Statements such as these may be found in numerous tablets which flowed from the pen of Baha'u'llah during these 3 years. And further on he alludes to the martyrdom of Badi, when he refers to the lamentations of the inmates of the cities of justice and equity. In one instance this took the form of a famine, which soon after the martyrdom of Badi claimed the lives of a great many people in that land. Mention should, moreover, be made of the devastating famine, which about a year after the illustrious Badi had been tortured to death, ravaged Persia, and reduced the population to such extremities that even the rich went hungry, and hundreds of mothers ghoulishly devoured their own children. The effect of the famine was so devastating that Haji Mullah Ali Akbar Shah Mirzadi, known as Haji Akhun, wrote a letter to Baha'u'llah, begged forgiveness for the people of Persia, and asked for relief in their sufferings. In a tablet to him, Baha'u'llah affirms that the famine was God's punishment for the martyrdom of Badi, declares that prior to that he had prophesied in his tablets impending afflictions and tribulations, and states that were it not for the sake of the believers, the whole nation would have been struck down by God. He then responds favorably to Haji Akhun's intercession and assures him that soon the situation would change and God would grant them relief. The Shah, who was usually eager to see the photographs of prisoners, ordered a photograph to be taken of Badi, especially when he had heard the stories of his fortitude under torture. The photograph shows the brazier of fire containing the rods of iron in the foreground, and is the best testimony to the spirit of steadfastness and resignation, of calm and assurance which Badi's face portrays. We have also sent unto thee a photograph of His Holiness the glorious Badi, whom thy Lord did send to His Highness Nasruddin Shah, with a manifest epistle by which he perfected the proof and evidence to the people of Persia. He was sitting between the executioners at the time of his death, with all dignity, while turning unto God. Dear friends, that was the account of the story of Badi, a youth transformed by Baha'u'llah. Thank you, dear friends. Thank you.